Elementalist. In 3.13, GGG decided to completely rework her ascendancy due to being incredibly lackluster when compared to other ascendancies that are available for you. One of these most beautiful changes ever was making golems respawn automatically after they die after 4 seconds. We all know they die a lot, so let's be real here, this is amazing for all you guys out there who love golems. But on top of that, we get convergence, which allows you then to get AoE and damage when you need it the most. But let's be real here, you clicked here for Ignite. So the real talk of this video, and why you're here, is Shaper of Flames. Let's talk about it. Ignite Divine Ire. Now, for those people wondering why Divine Ire is so good for Ignite, and why it's such a hard feat to accomplish before Elementals got her buffed, here's what you need to know. Divine Ire is a channeling skill. It's a channeling skill that gains stages as you channel it. And if you guys didn't know, it has a maximum of 20 stages. And the thing that's really cool is that you get 70% more damage of hits and ailments, aka Ignite, per stage. So at 20 stages, you actually get 1,400% increased damage, or actually more damage, more multiplier, for Ignite. But here's the catch. It's a physical gem that's converted to lightning. And last time I checked, if you're not playing an Elementalist, you have to be doing fire damage in order to Ignite. So let's rewind back a bit. If you were not an Elementalist in the current state of the game, how would you Ignite using Divine Ire? Well, one of the options you could go is using Avatar of the Fire, which converts 50% of every single damage type into fire. But we're not going to get into the technicalities of actually converting 100% of that physical and lightning into fire, but let's say it did. We come across another problem. When you're playing an Ignite build, you're going to be using Elemental Equilibrium. It's one of the go-to supports in the damn node. It's a keystone. You have to be using it in order to get the most amount of damage for an Ignite build. What it dictates is that when you hit with an element, the other elements get negative res, while the element you hit with get positive res. I.e., in English words, if you hit with cold damage, the enemy will get positive 25% cold res, but minus 50 fire and lightning. It also works if you hit with multiple elements. So if you hit with cold and lightning, they get positive 25% cold and lightning and negative 50% fire. The issue is when you have Avatar of the Fire, you can only deal fire damage. This includes every skill gem in existence because it converts everything into fire. Well, half of it anyway, but you can only also deal fire damage. So like you can't do lightning, you can't do fizz, you can't do chaos. It's just fire. So if you hit with Divine Ire and you apply, fire damage, they're gonna get positive fire res, and you can't even use another skill gem like say Stormbrand or Orb of Storms that does usually lightning damage to change it back into negative fire because they're still doing only fire damage. So that throws that concept completely out of the window, which leads us to option number 2. You have 2 other items that you would actually use in order to Ignite with different elements. Option number 1 is Hymn Sorrows. Hymn Sorrow allows your cold damage to Ignite, in which in this case you can convert all the damage of Divine Ire into cold. How would you do this? Well, Hymn Sorrow converts 50% of physical into cold, thus converting that Divine Ire into half cold. And then the lightning, you would have to use 2 Call of the Brotherhoods in order to convert all that lightning to cold, making all your damage cold, which you can now Ignite. This is very cool, as it allows you to then use Elemental Equilibrium, hit with cold, and now you do negative fire. Great. That's not a bad idea, honestly, for a build. But we're Elementalists, and we'll get to that in a little bit on why that's actually not the best way to use her. Option number 2, and the option I absolutely hate the most, is using a Stormfire Ring. Stormfire Ring allows your lightning damage to Ignite, in which case you don't have to convert to cold, and you can not have to use all your freaking ring slots and your glove slot. You can just pop in 1 ring, convert the other 50% to lightning, and now your lightning damage can Ignite, and you benefit the same way from Elemental Equilibrium. Again, let's go on to the issue with that now when you're playing an Elementalist. Shaper of Flame dictates that all damage can Ignite, but it also dictates that if the highest damage type of the hit that applied the Ignite, aka your Divine Ire, is fire, it will do 25% more damage with Ignite, meaning that your goal now is to get majority fire damage hit on that Divine Ire. Boom, how do we actually convert all that damage? Well, here's the things that you have to realize. You don't have to convert all of it into fire. It just says the highest damage type, meaning you can actually have cold, fire, and lightning, but as long as the fire is the biggest portion, you're good to go. Meaning, we don't have to convert all of our damage into fire. We just need to convert 60% maybe. Good enough, right? Good enough. How can we do this? Easily with Magmatic Strikes. You get 40% conversion, and we do have a lot of fire damage on tree because even though the damage of the hit is primarily another element, it still does fire damage for the Ignite. No matter what element applied the Ignite is always fire damage. Keep that in mind. That is very, very handy. So, now you're thinking, with Magmatic Strikes converting 40% of our physical damage to fire, also we're using things like Herald of Ash. I understand why, a little bit why it's so broken. We'll get to that. Wait a bit. That also gives a lot more fire damage, and of course all the fire damage in a tree primarily makes our fire damage the most damage out of all, sources of damage we have in our Divine Ire. On top of that, if you want that extra juicy effect, you can get Fizz to fire in your gloves, but it's absolutely not required in this build, thank the Lord. So now that we have the majority of our Divine Ire damage converted to fire, in order to deal the majority type fire damage to abuse Shaper of Flames 25% more damage, the next question becomes, and all you guys in chat are already asking me, doesn't that mess up elemental equilibrium because now you're doing fire damage, which increases the res? Well, here's the thing. We're not using Avatar of the Fire, which means that we can still do other elements. Meaning, we can still use Stormbrand, Tempest Shield, which we do use. I'll get over the defenses in a bit. Right, we'll get over that. And, obviously, there is Orb of Storms. Using all these 3 skill gems, they do primarily lightning damage. When you apply your first Ignite, using your Divine Ire, that Ignite lasts a certain amount of duration, which means you don't have to hit them again. But what you can do is, after dealing said damage with the Ignite, right, you can immediately reapply a different element to then lower their res by the opposite. So then we can use Orb of Storms to hit with lightning damage, thus lowering their fire res by -50 right after you applied your fire-based Ignite. If you guys catch my drift. Now, the reason why this works so beautifully is because the damage of the Ignite is based off your base damage, aka the flat number on your tooltip. It's not affected by the damage taken by the enemy, meaning their resistances, their armor, their HP, whatever the case may be, does not affect the base damage of the Ignite. In other words, in math, the way the best I can explain this to you guys is, if I apply an Ignite that does, let's say, flat damage 100, if the enemy has 50 fire res, that Ignite will do significantly less damage. Yes. But the Ignite is still the same damage no matter what, whether he has 50 fire res or mine is -50 fire res. It's hard to explain, but the Ignite's still the same. It just gets multiplied after the fact. Hope you guys can follow my drift, right? So, the next thing you guys need to know on why Shaper of Flames is so freaking busted is that extra physical modifiers, aka Herald of Ash, is considered base damage. And the higher the base damage, the higher the Ignite. How can we abuse this? Very, very easily. Since Shaper of Flames makes every single damage type Ignite, we can abuse every single physical as extra elemental chaos. Who cares what element it is at this point? It can be extra physical as physical, and it will increase your Ignite damage. I.e., Herald of Ash increases your physical as extra 15% as fire. That's one source. Divine Fury in the tree gives you another 5% as physical. If you get Magmatic Strike, which obviously you are because it's inside the build, you get an additional 5% of physical as extra damage. On top of that, there's also Divine Wrath. It gives another 5% of physical as lightning damage. You also got a whopping Adziri's Promise, which is absolutely disgusting for the build because it gives you 15% and I think roughly 20% of elemental and physical as extra chaos. Since chaos can ignite, it also increases your base damage. I hope I'm not going too fast for you guys. And on top of that, you can use Sin's Rebirth, which gives you Unholy Might. That gives you 30% of physical as extra chaos. But this is a good transition into the next topic, defenses. I originally told you guys that Sin's Rebirth is one of the best class to use, and of course it is because it gives you 30%. But ironically, Taste of Hate is actually a better choice. Taste of Hate gives you 20% of physical as extra cold. It's not as high as the chaos counterpart, for he's reading a think a bit. Adziri's Promise gives you extra chaos from your element, and since Taste of Hate gives you extra cold, right, that will then boost the Adziri's Promise, making that 20% and 30% difference from Sin's Rebirth to Taste of Hate actually very, very minor. Great, because Taste of Hate actually makes 20% or at least 10% some portion of physical damage taken as cold. And the reason why this is so important is because fizz damage is your biggest weakness in this build. So how do we solve our defenses for this build? Because honestly, it's incredibly important and you guys need to pay attention. Well, let's start with the incredibly obvious. The build naturally gets 5.3k HP from, of course, the life node on the tree and the life on gear. On top of that, because that's not enough, we do use a Devouring Datum, which gives you Eldritch Battery. Eldritch Battery dictates that Energy Shield, instead of protecting your life, now protects your mana. It also means that you also spend Energy Shield as your source of mana, which is absolutely great because Mana Leech is not a thing in this game anymore. But if you're using Eldritch Battery and ES becomes our mana, ES Leech still exists, so you technically have Mana Leech through the form of Energy Shield Leech. But what's so good about this, we can combine this with Mind Over Matter, which makes that now 30% of our damage taken, all sources of damage, is taken from our mana before our life. But because Eldritch Battery, that energy shield, is protecting the mana, it actually hits the energy shield first. Keep in mind though, the chaos damage still skips, energy shield still applies, so chaos res is incredibly useful, and we do have chaos res in this build at a positive value, which is absolutely great for defenses. Keep that in mind. So another rule must apply. You must have enough energy shield so that when you take damage, right, you must have enough energy shield so when you take damage, that you don't drop all the way to 0 mana before you die, because that means you're literally a walking duck going through your map, obviously, with no mana, not being able to dash, cast anything, and obviously just freaking the hell out because you're panicking. So in order to get the magic rule in, you must have 43% of your life pool as mana, or in this case, energy shield. And when you have 5.3k, you roughly need around 2,200 energy shield. In this case, we have around 2,100 from our ES gear, the beautiful Vaal Regalia that we have, and other sources of energy shield like our shield, which is great, giving us roughly around 7k effective HP. The reason how you get this number so high is because if you get a Vaal Regalia, especially, it could be any chest piece, but Vaal Regalia ideally, you can get the Veiled mod, gain 10% of maximum life as extra energy shield, and it's literally 4 chaos to craft. It's a prefix on your chest piece, and it gives you literally over 1,000 free energy shield. It's absolutely bonkers. Highly recommended. But it still leaves the fact that now that we're using energy shield gear, we have no evasion and we have no fizz damage. How do we mitigate this? Well, since we're using Bastion of the Elements, we do get a Primordial Aegis, the beautiful bubble. That beautiful bubble, you combine with other bubbles MTX and get the quad bubble. It's glorious. But needless to say, it blocks around 100 damage per notable on the tree of elemental damage. Since we roughly around have 38 notables by the time we hit level 92, including our cluster jewels, which is great, we actually block 3,800 elemental damage. On top of that, we can combine this with Steel Skin on a walk at level around 20, gives us around 2,000 buff damage, kind of like a mini Mind Over Matter for all sorts of damage taken, which helps an F-ton. But this leaves another issue that I happen to come across, and that is stuns. There's one issue with Divine Iron, as you have to channel, and if you get stunned while channeling, you actually pre-ejaculate, I guess you say, your Divine Ire before you want to, before you hit 20 stages. You don't want to do that. You don't want to pre-fire. So we have to become immune to stuns, and the way we do this is actually very, very simple and completely worthwhile. I highly recommend you do not skip damage for this, because you do still get a little bit of damage. By anointing the node Lucidity, we do get 40% chance to avoid being stunned while channeling. On top of that, I do have a glove craft, which is very cheap. That makes you 20% chance to avoid being stunned while casting, or just in general to avoid being stunned. And then on top of that, using the channeling cluster jewel, which is actually incredibly cheap, we can use the beautiful node Unwavering Focus, which means we have an additional 40% chance to avoid being stunned while channeling. Put this together, 40, 40, and 20, and now we have a 100% chance to avoid being stunned while channeling. Yes, you can still be stunned while moving around, but it's not a big of a deal since you're usually dodging things. But while you're charging up your Divine Ire and your stages for that beautiful Ignite, this is incredibly important, as you do not want to get stunned before you hit your 20, because then your damage feels incredibly lackluster. This is a great way to get over it, and I highly recommend it. Which leaves the last issue is, if we're taking damage and it's hitting our energy shield and our energy shield drops, how do we recover it naturally? Well, using this also beautiful Thread of Hope over here, not only do we get Breath of Flames or even more damage multiplier, we get Snow Forge for more damage and res, we get Arcane Focus for way more energy shield, giving us roughly around another 100 energy shield. We also pick up a node called Light Eater for free, which gives us spell damage, leads us energy shield. Yes, we're still doing spell damage with our Divine Ire, even though it's igniting. This alone will recover all your energy shield and basically mana leech for the build, and that is all you need for incredible sustain. Combine all these things together with the disorientating display, allowing you to get blind, which gives a flat 50% evasion when you use the Elementalist skill. The build is actually incredibly tanky, and you still get one shot, but it happens very infrequently, and you will survive as long as you play smart. And that is how I made and perfected this build. And of course, if you still want more damage, you can always just get more damage from quality on support gems and wicked gems to your choosing. And with that, it's time for the 3 criterias for a good build. Criteria number 1, player speed. Criteria number 2, defenses. Does he take reduced damage when he absorb pain? Ooh, damn. At least I can tank a fucking Minotaur shit. Oh yeah, I tanked a few slams, no problem, right? And criteria number 3, the damage. Oh shit. That every single time. That was so clean. That was so clean. I executed that shit perfectly. Jesus. I love how crafting blood just makes it so easy. Ugh. Alright. Now, before we move on, I want to sincerely apologize for the delay on this video. My second character is already done with everything in the game and it's been an absolute blast. And my third character is actually an Inquisitor using Battle Mage and Fanaticism, as I found some 5-head way of actually making that damn build work, and it's been an absolute joy to play with. So we'll see how that fares out, but I hope you guys are excited for the content to come. But other than that, as per usual, if you guys have enjoyed the content you've seen so far, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. That helps me out immensely with the YouTube algorithm. On top of that, if you guys have any questions whatsoever, go ahead and join the Discord link down below, or, ask away in the YouTube comments, and I'll do my best to get to all of you. And lastly, I do stream on Twitch every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you guys want to see how these builds are made, the link is down below, and I'll gladly appreciate your company. And with that, guys, no further delays, let's go on to the build guide. Now, welcome back into the detailed version of the build guide. My character, of course, is an Elementalist called Goku's Fire Beam, because obviously Divine Ire is a beam, and it's red because of the Automaton Divine Ire effect. It's a fire beam. Honestly, though, the normal version, which has light, if you guys want to check it out real quick, is actually pretty dope, and I wouldn't mind using it because it has this little, like, very cool sound effect, and the beam kind of, like, pushes back up. It's kind of weird how do you describe it, but it just looks a lot cooler, I think. The only reason I'm using the MTX is fire and it's red. Literally that. So don't be shamed for not using the MTX. But things I do want to cover, because I did not cover it in the beginning, we do have Wave of Conviction, and Wave of Conviction lowers their res by minus 25 fire. And when you combine that with Mastermind of Discord, it's literally an additional 25. That's literally minus 50 fire. Right? We do have a trigger right here with Stormbrand and the Wave of Conviction to make it automated, and Combustion, meaning that when any of these things ignite, since they always ignite due to, Elementalist saying you always ignite, It's another minus 19 fire res, which is absolutely insane. And we do have an Orb of Storms over here for an additional minus 44 fire res with a Hex Touch and increased crit, so it procs Elemental Overload. This is insane. It's just so much sustain, which leads me to the next situation. We do have a Vitality Watcher's Eye. I am using Vitality, which gives around the same life regen as I would from a buffed Stone Golem. We'll get to the Golems later, right? In a little bit. And this is great because we do have Energy Shield Leech from Light Eater, like I mentioned earlier, to sustain our mana, but we don't have any sustain for life other than the minor amount of life regen, which is around 280. So in order to make up for that, since we still do damage, this helps a crap ton for sustaining your life during boss fights, during mapping. I highly recommend it because now we have life and ES Leech, and it's just great overall. Now on to the last thing you guys want to probably complain about in the comments is why not pick up Elementalist? It gives a chance, or gives us immunity to elemental ailments, basically, right? But frankly put, I just don't like it. When it comes to ailments, the only ailments I really give a crap about are shock, not even shock, freeze, and bleed, and then warding flasks for curses. You're gonna end up using a lot of unique flasks in here, so we're really limited to just really, you know, freeze and bleed. Freeze I have in my silver flask, and bleed on my diamond flask of life. Shock very rarely happens, and ignite, you can't even tell it's being applied to you. Honestly, who cares about ignite? Literally, the only one that's really annoying is shock, and you can avoid this by not running shock maps, and ideally also anything that shocks you is usually avoidable, like the tentacle, or not the tentacle, but seeing, what am I even saying? The Tesla coils from Minotaur. Just don't walk into them. It's just simple mechanics. There's very little things that shock you in this game, as a majority of it is minor lightning, mostly fizz and cold and fire and chaos. Right? It's just the way it is. It doesn't happen too often, so I don't really care about that. As for the damage, it doesn't even come close to 30% more damage from Heart of Destruction, and the AoE is absolutely amazing if you actually combine it with a Explode chest. I didn't have one, but you're going to see soon how good it can be, because I do have a little minor one that I made, a little base type, which I'm planning to make for another, you know, base type in the future for another build. We'll get there when I decide when to use this damn thing, right? We're going to do a showcase on that in the map as well with our normal things, but it's very, very cool. It just gives way more damage. Stone Golem gives roughly the same thing as his Vitality. I just don't care. And Lightning Golem, we don't benefit a lot from cast speed because we have to do one ignite, and that's pretty much it. Ice Golem is not effective since we don't need crit. And what's the last one? Chaos Golem is around 12% fist mitigation with all the buffs. I just don't think it's worth dropping my Stormbrand with Combustion, Wave of Conviction trigger, and my casting damage taken setup for freaking golems that are gonna die. And during those 4 seconds, I feel like my build's probably gonna decrease a lot. While here, I get insane more penetration and freaking AoE and more damage. I just don't like the golems. If you want to go the golem route, all you, go ahead. But I like this setup, and that's what I've gone with. Last thing I want to mention, since we are Energy Shield with my Eldritch Battery, since it covers our mana, a nice way of getting this is, you see here, we have 972 Energy Shield. This is primarily coming from our gloves, and our shield is only 120, honestly, not that big of a deal. And of course, we're using Divine Datum for an extra 170. Boots have very minor. But this is Val Regale I actually bought using the Ethereal cards, which you need like 7 or 8 of them. And they give you a 6 link, which I level 80. You can probably just buy like a 6 link white Val Regale with 30% quality for like 60C or some stupid number. Thanks to Harvest. Dirt cheap. But if you're in console, it's a good way, of course, to getting, just a really easy 6 link Val Regalia. Then you want to use Deafening Essences of Greed, which gives you like guaranteed over 90 life to 100 life on it. And you really need res. All you're looking for is an open prefix so you can craft maximum life as extra maximum energy shield. This mod, plus the Val Regalia, it takes my 972 energy shield to a whopping 2,000 energy shield, giving me a total of around over 7,000, basically HP. Combine that with Steel Skin, which gives me a buff of 1,946 damage, which makes 70% of the damage from hits taken to that instead of my overall life pool. And on top of that, we have a 3,700 primal ages. It's just pretty freaking tanky with the blind, with the ES leech, with the life leech. It's great. It's great. And we do have a taste of fate, to avoid 20% of the physical damage. With this, the fizz that was like pretty much cleared. And of course, we do have, the avoidance to stuns using lucidity, right? This unwavering focus, which is dirt cheap. You combine that with rapid infusion for even, more damage, since infusion just give you 10% more damage based on the skill tags of your skill. Divine Ire gives has a physical and lightning tag, I believe. Let's go over it real quick. Yeah, lightning spell, AoE, channeling, physical. So lightning and physical will get 10% more damage and we take 10% less damage, which is great for defenses. And because we're Shaper of Flames, I think it actually makes me deal more damage. For some reason in PoE, it turned out to be the highest DPS for the second one. It was dirt cheap, bought it anyway. And yeah, with that, we're immune to stuns while we're channeling our Divine Ire. It has been absolutely fantastic. So before we get into the gear and into the tree, I want to, go into a quick map and also showcase to you an explode chest on a 4-lane because it's the most I can do right now. And yeah, it's pretty freaking sweet. So let's go into that. And so even though I killed the majority of this, bosses with this character at Awakening level 5, we are already level 8, and I've already killed the Lair of Hydra, Forge, Phoenix, and things like that. Right, so we got a little few points here, but I'm finally progressing into the end game. We have a few unique watchstone and things like that, which are very, very cool. But the map we're going to be running is Burial Chambers tier 16, which I believe is around here. Yes, and we have sections with hunted traders, additional monsters and things like that. And here I want to showcase I have Shaper for more extra monsters, Metamorph, and a Legion. The Legion, I actually want to do it to showcase you the power of the explode chest, but since it is a tier 16, I'm a bit worried about I have enough res, but the damage on the 4-link, we'll see what happens. But, just showcase you a normal one, and then I'll showcase you, a Legion with Explode right after. Let's get right into this, and why not just put Domination for Shrines, because I like Shrines. All right, and here we go. Now, this is Ignite. We do have Ignite Proliferation, so it's going to spread around very easily. We do have Herald of Ash, so all that stuff
beneath the peaceful plain
does make for a lot of clear, even without an explode chest. Does great. As you can see, everything pretty much dies pretty easily. Lower the volume a bit.
When I'm ready and not before.
As you can see, my trigger actually goes into the pack of mobs. You see the Stormbrand just jumping all over the place over there, and the Wave Conviction and trigger. And that's why I do not want to drop my, all this utility for freaking golems that don't have a 6-link linked with minion life and all that bullcrap to keep them alive. And I know they can respawn, but I just don't like golems, guys. It's my personal preference. So you guys can do whatever you like best. I'll do a quick ritual here. As you guys can see, I'm barely taking damage here. On a tier 16, pretty juiced up. I have minus fire, or minus max res. I have extra cold. And yeah, they also do 2 additional projectiles. Right? Let's see, I'm actually going to try to see how the explode chest works a bit. Real quick. We're going to lose a lot of life. I'm still capped res. But let's see what our damage is going to be on this 4-link of ours, right? So drop this, drop that. Get this. Get a Divine Ire. So you can see the beautifulness of getting like an explode chest. So if you guys have an explode chest, feel free to try to make one with the maximum mana. Yeah. Oh. It's just so good, dude. Even on a 4-link, dude, it's just great. Let's see if we can fight that Legion. So the explode chest should be carrying me a little bit here on the 4-link. You can see I just touched some Wave of Conviction and he'll die. I'm gonna skip the rituals for now because honestly, not biggie. Oh my, I'm kind of sad that I didn't use an explode chest for this build. This is awesome. If you guys don't know, I'm addicted to explosions any way I can. That's feasible, of course. I don't try to force it. But, oh, that sounds so good. Everything just blows up in one shot with an explode chest. And the reason why this works so well is because... There we go. And I didn't even touch it, apparently. The reason why this works so well primarily is because Herald of Ash and explode chests scale together very easily. Right? Because the explosion will then hit something, that thing will die, the Herald of Ash will proc, and then will cause, them to melt and then spread that burning into another enemy, causing them to die and then explode, and it causes a chain reaction. So it's great for this sort of things, and we have a Legion. Let's see what's up. I've never seen this before. This is the first time I'm doing this. And let's see what happens. Yes, the power of Explode Chest and Elementalist AoE. Yeah, about golems. Anybody want to go golems? I don't want to go golems. I prefer this. I don't know about you, but I think fun is a criteria that I need to have. Wait, here we go. Yeah, boy. Now, what you can do is get a Divergent Herald of Ice. Excuse me, Herald of Ash. Divergent Herald of Ash gives Herald of Ash 20% extra AoE. I do have one on another character of mine. Am I going to mention it yet? If you want to go watch my Twitch.
I need more mana.
Hoi, chill. My low mana pool and minus max res does not feel good on a 4-link. As you can see, even on a 4-link, we're doing some pretty decent damage. I'm not even charging all the way. So that's why I'm not even worried about, you know, can we kill everything in a boss, even though I only showed you awaken level 5. I think we're fine, guys. Just, I don't think you should be worried. But showing the power of money at its best. Now, this boss is annoying because it does regen. So I'm gonna be putting back my stuff, as I do not want to die when the map went so well. All right, let's get back our, you know, over 5k life and ES. Let's roll. With Infinite Proliferation, we don't really need anything. And there you go. And she's dead. Now, of course, this is less damage than the PoE because I do not have fire damage multi, things like that. My shield is just life and +1, you know, extra lightning, added res of harvest, no biggie there. And, you know, it's just that. You know, I'll go over the auras later. We do have a lot of auras since we are Eldritch Battery with Divine Datum. We can fit a lot of auras in, but let's do this real quick. Fossil Talisman, anything good here? Nope. Let's go. Alright, proc that. Charge it up. Free fire. Oi. See how you see that leech coming up? That leech comes so handy when you don't have a life flask to protect you, you know, when doing everything. So I highly recommend, because that leech probably saves my life there more than it should, you know. And there you go. That's the map. I'll loot everything after, and let's go into the, you know, skill tree and the gear. All right, now let's go over the skill tree very quickly. As you can see down here in the bottom left corner is PoE, the community fork version. If you guys do not know, the download link is below in the description. And we have here level 35, level 70, level 91. And I do have a no devouring datum tree. It's incredibly simple. We're just going and picking up Eldritch Battery. But we'll get there when we go over the skill tree. So let's first start at leveling, basically. At the beginning, you can go up and pick up, you know, spell damage, because you're going to be using spell damage as your primary source of damage, but it's not ideal for an ignite build because it does not affect ignites. Keep that in mind. So because of this, I skip it and I go for the end nodes, which is much more efficient. You can definitely do that. I doubt you have any issues. I do pick up the life here. You get fire walkers, and you're going to be primarily focused on fire skill gems. While leveling, I did brute force it with fireball, but it kind of needs extra projectiles and pierce in order to feel pretty good, or decently good early on, until you get chain and things like that. By then, though, you also have level 12 Incinerate if you want to mess around with that. I didn't personally mess around with it, but you could. I just brute forced it with Fireball. And then after that, of course, you can, at level 28, use Firestorm until you get your first Ascendancy, and then use, you know, Divine Ire. But just so you guys know, let's keep going. We have Quick Recovery. And the first things you guys actually want, I would recommend to you to just go directly towards, is Elemental Overload. The reason behind this is because in Act 1, you're going to get Orb of Storms and increased crit. Put it together in a 2-link, and now you have a high chance of critting with your Orb of Storms. You can proc it, and then this will, of course, proc your Elemental Overload, because you will, you know, crit. Even if it's like 5-10% chance, you'll get it, you know, the majority of the time. And this is basically a free 40% more damage multiplier. And I hope you just rush through all the acts very nicely. I would not recommend picking up Elemental Equilibrium until you have your first Ascendancy, which is Shaper of Flames, which allows all your damage to ignite. Because we're not really focused on the ignite just yet, and it's actually going to hamper your skill at the beginning of the game, because you're not going to be overriding it constantly yet, right? Now, you can choose go onto Constitution if you so desire early on, but I kind of leave that towards later in the leveling skill tree. Right, so I recommend going to Elemental Overload first. Right, I come down here, I do pick up Retribution just for the, basically, cast speed and right that. Discipline for life, and Holy Domain's awesome for the elemental damage, the chance to ignite, which you don't really need once you get your Ascendancy, because you always ignite anyway. But the most important part is it gives you 12% all res, which is great for leveling, right? We do have Explosive Impact for, you know, fire damage, AoE, a little bit of stats, which you're going to need. Holy Fire is amazing, just to buff up that ignite already. Go ahead and pick it up, since if you're using Fireball, the ignite's going to do a decent chunk of damage, so might as well. We pick up Purity of Flesh, and then we have Devotion, and we already pick up Divine Judgment for a lot of damage. This fills out, you know, a good chunk of just straight up fire damage and life early on, which is great. And then after that, I will recommend going down for Elemental Equilibrium, because at this point, which is a level 35 tree, you should be level 28 in Act 3, getting your Divine Ire. Right? So when you hit Act 3, of course, you're going to get Firestorm, Divine Ire. Use Firestorm, level up Divine Ire, And then once you're ready, maybe in Act 4, or if you feel comfortable, you can do it right at Act 3. Do your lab, and then when you do lab, you want to rush and get Shaper of Flames. This basically starts off your build. It's kind of the beauty of the Elementalist. Allows all your damage to ignite, right? You always ignite, so you don't even have to worry about chance to ignite like my old discharge. Well, not even old, is new already. The Trickster build that I made for discharge, I had to worry about ignite chance. I had to worry about all that stuff. As an Elementalist, you do not, which makes the leveling process a lot easier, right? Highly recommend it. So remember though, if you're gonna pick up Elemental Equilibrium and you have Shaper Flames, you're primarily doing fire damage, so go ahead and use Overstorms to override it to get minus 50 fire. Very good. Going on to the level 70 skill tree. At this point, you're basically right after you clear Act 10, right? We do pick up more life, your crew preparation. At this point, you do want to decide whether you want Mind Over Matter or not. The reason you pick up Mind Over Matter or not, it depends on if you have enough energy shield. I did not pick it up until basically like really late, around level 88, right? So you can go ahead and drop it, but the way I would recommend it is if you, how would I say, have enough energy shield and you're using Devouring Datum around, let's say 1,500 to 1,800 energy shield, go ahead and use it. The way you probably notice, if you have a Devouring Datum, a 100 ES shield, which is very easy, it's like basically the base ES for the shield, and a chest piece that's ideally energy shield like a Valregalia, which you can get easily using the ethereal cards, right? And with the mod, 10% of maximum life as extra energy shield. Once you can put that on basically right at level 70. So if you have the items, go ahead, pick up Mind Over Matter. Otherwise, wait on it. That's what I recommend. Wait on it. If you do not have like over 1,500 ES minimum, and you don't even have the Light Eater leech, because you can't anoint it very cheaply early on, is what I did, I don't recommend it. Right? So if anything, we'll leave it checked out for now, so you don't have to worry about it. Right? Other than that, we do have a little bit of a cluster jewel, and the reason why I recommend this is because stun immunity is kind of a little bit of an annoyance. So I'd recommend to go ahead and, you know, rush for it if you so desire. But again, you can't drop it. Just keep in mind that your stun is going to be a little bit annoying. But considering early on, you're probably not going to have too many issues because the damage you take, it's not that much until like red tier maps. You're probably fine without it. But I did it anyway because I highly recommend you guys to pick one up. Right? And then, of course, probably the most important thing where you should rush first is Magmatic Strikes. That way you get that conversion for Divine Iron. So Divine Iron does primarily fire damage. And that way we take advantage of, where is it? 25% more damage with Ignites. Right? Now, so what I would say is right after basically 35, I would just shoot straight for Magmatic and Arsonist. And then I would pick up Divine Fury, Divine Wrath to get a crap ton of damage early on, right? Pick up more life, and then at that point get Constitution, of course, like the old tree, and try to go for the Cluster Jewel. The reason I'm saying this is because Burning Bright's not that big of a deal. The only two that you really matter are Cremator, and the reason I want you guys to pick this up is because it kills the enemy's body. So if you're fighting a Porcupine and the Porcupine pops, this stops him, because fist damage is a big problem in the build. You know, and we don't have any dodge reliably without, I don't even have elusive, so if you get elusive, you might have a little bit of dodge, but it's not going to be enough. If you get Cremator, they get exploded, and it's not going to cause a chain reaction or anything like an explode chest, and that completely, like, kills the Porcupines. It'll pop. If you have an explode chest, you do not need Cremator, keep that in mind. So if you want to go the explode route, like I showed in the maps, you do not have to pick up Cremator. You can go ahead and drop it. Right? I'll save you 2 points. I have no problems with that. I do recommend picking up at least a Distorting Display just for the chance of blind, and it's basically 50% free, 50% evasion against attacks. And I recommend enough. And this one is literally dirt cheap. You can get it for like a few C, like 10, 15 C. And this allows you to basically get a little bit more stun immune to prepare for your stun immunity later on. Right? And that's pretty much the gist of that. If you don't want this, I'll add another tree. You guys can see here. It's basically going to be up to the level 91. No Devouring Datum, and instead of this, you're probably gonna get a Thread of Hope, or you can go rush right into Eldritch Battery. And at this point, this is only if you do not have a Devouring Datum. Devouring Datum has Eldritch Battery already in the helmet, and because of that, you don't have to spend these 5 points to pick it up, which saves you a lot of effort. If you do not, like I did, you know, early on, Devouring Datums are like freaking 5 exalts, but now they're like 10 C. Feels bad. You probably don't have to worry about this. I'm just going out there for maybe the console players or somebody else. So you can always spend these 5 points and get that. And if you have like roughly 1,500, you can use like a Uber Circlet until then to make up for the energy shield from the Devouring Datum. You can go ahead and pick up Mind Over Matter. All right, pretty good. But in this case, we do add a Thread of Hope, which is absolutely amazing in this build. If you put a Thread of Hope here, right, you pick up Light Eater for your ES leech, is all the leech you would ever need for your, Elder Battery, since that makes you spend Energy Shield as mana, right? So this technically becomes Mana Leech, even though it's Energy Shield Leech. And when you combine it with Miner of Matter, it also becomes ES Leech, because now the mana is part of your life pool. Great. Highly recommend it. Rift of Flames, awesome damage source, right? We pick up Arcane Focus. It gives you literally, you see here, 162 Energy Shield, which is great. Snow Forge, which is awesome, gives you fire damage, a little bit of crit for your Elemental Overload. But what's cool about it, it gives you a little bit back of the res that you lose from the Thread of Hope, right? And if you want, you can pick up Practical Application, but I've learned that while casting and Chance to Avoid Interruption and Stun Avoidance do not stack. So if you pick this up, it does not stack with the chance to avoid being stunned, to keep that in mind. But if you do need the Strength and Dexterity, you can pick it up for 1 point, which is great. Right, we do pick up the rest of the life nodes, and that's pretty much the only difference. We do pick up more jewels, and the jewels that you're really looking for, right, at this point are damage over time, fire damage over time multiplier, and burning damage. It's probably your best one, burning, but it's more expensive. And then, of course, maximum life. The only reason these can be kind of expensive is because of Righteous Fire. So, because Righteous Fire is usually a very popular build. They use the same sort of stats, and Ignite's kind of popular right now due to the Elementalist. So, all these are for last. If anything, just get a dual prop with life and, straight up like either fire damage over time or burning damage, something like that. Right, nothing too crazy. And that's pretty much like the only gist. And then if you have a Devouring Datum, you can drop that and pick up the last Cluster Jewel. And this is basically like the majority, not majority, a very large chunk of damage. You get Blowback, which makes you just deal more damage per second. It does not affect the overall, like it's 32 million you see here. This one node does not change. It just changes the Ignite DPS. So basically you deal more damage over a shorter duration, but overall it's the same amount of damage. It's just good for just watching the HP just fall quicker. Nothing else. And since you're going to be applying an Ignite more than once, sometimes because let's say the boss doesn't die, you don't have enough gear, right? This is good for like just boosting your DPS. It's just good for clear as well. Then Cooked Alive is just another free 10% penetration, which is absolutely great. But the reason why it's so good because penetration does not affect Ignite. Debuffs like this -10 fire does affect like, a curse that lowers the res by -fire. Things like that works, but penetration like fire penetration or Wise Oak does not affect Ignite. Keep that in mind. Right, and of course another jewel. Pretty much that is literally the gist of that. So just so I can go rewind a bit, for your second ascendancy after Shaper Flames, you want to rush for Heart of Destruction for the more damage and AoE. Right, Mastermind and Discord's on the way, which is amazing because at this point you should be using Wave of Conviction, and Wave of Conviction basically lowers the res by -25. It's primarily going to do fire damage because that's how we set up our build, especially with Herald of Ash and things like that. We'll go over that stuff in a bit. And because of this, it'll actually lower the res by a -50. You add that to Elemental Equilibrium, that's another -50. It's -100. Combustion's -19. This thing is -10. So that's like 129% res. And then Flammability for -44. Let's say reduced by Curse Effectiveness is only 15. That's literally like 100 -40, 140, something like that. It's a ridiculous amount of penetration. It's absolutely disgusting. So it's great. I highly recommend it. It doesn't even the damage is so above and beyond Elementor that it's too good to pass up. And the AoE is great for the Ignite Proliferation and the Explode if you get an Explode chest. And then of course at level 91 you just pick up Bashing the Elements. The reason for this is because since you get 100 damage shield per allocated notable, notables are these big ones. Like even this is considered a notable. Right, these little big ones are here. Holy Fire. It's just the main notable of that wheel. It's not going to be useful until late game where you have a lot of notables, right? No point in picking up early and getting a 200 shield. Doesn't do much. And that's pretty much the gist of that. Right, now let's go over
ready and not before.
our weapons real quickly. Now, the two weapons you can use, I do not recommend a wand unless it's a Profane wand. Profane wand gives you cast speed. Spell damage does not affect Ignite, so I do not recommend you to do that. But instead, you can use a Scepter, which gives you elemental damage. I highly recommend it. My base kind of sucks. You kind of want like a 40% damage base. Hey, but beggars can be choosers. This was my first character, so it's not the best of gear. It goes to show what you can be done with budget gear, right? That's why it was such a good league starter. And here I just have a Cruceptor. You want cast speed. That way this thing charges up quicker against bosses because you want to hit 20 stacks as quick as possible. +1 to level of all physical spell gems or lightning, both work, right? And then here I recommend there is fire damage, burning damage, but ideally, because it adds such a humongous damage boost that you guys can see here, right? You see it's 3.6 million because it's using my scepter. If you switch to the same scepter, but instead of burning damage, you get just 3% more, but it's fire damage over time multiplier, it goes to 4.1 million. It's like an extra half a mil or a little bit more. That's how strong the fire damage over time multiplier is. So if you can get a cast speed scepter with +1 lightning or physical and fire damage over time multi, you're in the clear. What you could do, right, since trigger is a suffix, kind of hard to do, you can multi-mod with a trigger and then fire dot multi, right? But that's kind of hard to do with cast speed and everything else. I'm not actually curious. I'm gonna give you false information. Fire dot multi, I believe, is a prefix, so it makes my life easier, right? Yeah, okay, so it's a prefix. If you put it on a one-handed melee, you get up to 20%, which is pretty freaking decent, honestly. So what you could do is, if you have 2 open suffixes and an open prefix, which, let's say I didn't have burning damage here, I could actually fix this with Harvest, not gonna lie. I can remove fire. I can multi-mod this craft trigger, right, as the last suffix, because multi-mod is a suffix and it takes up a suffix slot. So I'll have cast speed, multi-mod, and trigger, all 3 suffixes taken up. And then on the top, I would have +1 physical and or lightning, right, and fire damage over time multiplier. Highly recommend that. That's great to use. Now, word of mouth, please do not ignore what I'm about to say. Do not get fire damage to spells. The only spell that should be doing fire damage is your Divine Ire. This is because you want Divine Ire to get the additional 25% more damage for the ignites, but you do not want your Orb of Storms, your Tempest Shield, right, to have, or in a Stormbrand basically too, to have any sort of fire damage, because then it's never going to overwrite the initial hit of fire damage for Elemental Equilibrium. Because yes, you can have 3 elements, and then if you do have all 3 elements, you would only apply +25 resistance to every element instead of a -50 to the opposites, right? So please, please, please never get fire damage over time, fire damage to spells on any sort of things. That's why I originally had a Circle of Anguish, and then it freaking clicked in my head that it has add 15 to something number fire damage, and when it doesn't specify attacks or spells, it's both. So if you see like adds, you know, let's say rough number 1 to 10 fire damage, and that's literally it, that means it's applying to both your attacks and your spells. You can't use it. If you get fire damage to attacks, I don't care, but just do not get fire damage to spells. Neither am I. Right, and here, because we have a trigger, every single spell is on a 4-second cooldown, and we have Stormbrand. It will, you know, while we're clearing, it will literally appear where you point. So it's great for just, you know, chaining off enemies while mapping, or it's good for reapplying it instantaneously during a, you know, a boss fight. I recommend it. You never know when you're moving and you want to aim at something, and then it just appears all the way in the distance and it does it for you. So it allows you to do long distance ignites and overwrite that initial elemental equilibrium with ease, right? And here we also have Wave of Conviction. Yes, it does fire damage, but it's only 1 hit, so it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be overridden anyway, and it lowers res by -25. And then of course, because of Elementalist, it's another additional -25 because it is exposure. Exposure caps out at -25, so do not get any additional exposure over this. And then Combustion. The beauty about this, since we're an Elementalist and every damage can ignite, no matter what type of damage it is, I can only deal, well, I can continue to deal only lightning and a little bit of cold, right? Because of this scepter or whatever, right? With Stormbrand, and it can still ignite, so then I can put a Combustion on it and let it just, you know, give me a free 19% penetration. I call it pen, but it's like a debuff, right? And it's absolutely great. You know, it's a free like -19 fire res on top of this thing. So this together is like -119 res off of 2 link on a free cast. That. Give me a break, guys. It's so good, right? That's what I recommend. You can go for like quality, increases elemental damage instead of fizz if you want, but that's honestly barely does anything. It's like 10% damage. Who cares, right? Moving on to your Divine Datum. Divine Datum is actually like incredibly dirt cheap. It's around 15C, 20C right now, and what you're looking for with it is ideally duration of elements you inflict while focused. All it does is make the ignite last longer, so you don't have to apply it more often. Simple as that. It's good for fights where you kind of have to dodge a lot, so it's good to, like, you know, back off and let the ignite do its thing. It goes up to like 140, but since I was like, you know, a lot less money back then, it was more expensive, I bought the cheaper one. It would cost me, it saved me like an exalt. What you're looking for is just that, and the rest of it just stays the same. Just try to get like a high ES roll. And the reason why it's so good is because it gives you +1 socketed gems, but most importantly, it gives you socketed gems have 20% reduced mana reservation, along with the free Eldritch batteries, so you don't have to spend the 5 points all the way up here. Once I got my Devouring Datum, I removed it, you know. And here's where we have our auras. That way, all the auras get +1. We get Malevolence for damage over time. Arrow the Vat just for the extra physical, 15% of physical is extra fire. We already went over it, how good it is that it's considered base damage, so it actually affects the Ignite insanely well. You can come here and see my Divine IRE does 22,000 to 34,000 unbuffed, right? And if I were to move Hero the Vash, I lost 2,000 or 3,000 low, and I lost 4,000 high. Buy back again, yeah. I lost 3,000 from the low end and 4,000 from the top end. That's how good my Hero the Vash is. And of course, combine that with Adziri's Promise and removing, that's, you know, 44,000 now. And I'll lose 5,000, right? Because of the extra Elemental to Chaos. So it's insane how good it is. Recommend it. Summon Skitter Bots for the Chill and the Shock. Shock does affect the Ignite, which is great. Good for defense, good for damage. And then Enlighten level 3, and it allows you to fit all your auras. This is the beauty about Eldritch Battery, I don't say this enough, is that it allows you to reserve all your mana. Since your mana is not really your mana anymore, your Energy Shield is, you can just reserve all of it because you don't need it anymore. Right? Simple as that. And that's pretty much it. That's where you keep all your auras. Right? For your shield, all you're looking for is high life, +1 to lightning and or physical. Right? They both work. And res. Simple as that. I really just looked for like life and the +1 as lightning gems. And then I did like the harvest mod where you keep the prefixes but reroll the suffixes. And so I got something decent. I got res and crafted cast speed. Simple as that. But if you want more than this, then try to get a little bit more energy shield if you want. If you need more ES, a little bit of crit helps for elemental overload, but it's not necessary. That's pretty much it. You can't really do much with the shield other than just a +1 and res. Well, what you can do is actually get a fire damage. You can get like 40% fire damage as a prefix. That's expensive, you know. High life, +1 and fire damage. You're asking for quite a lot, but if you have the money, go for it. You can definitely do it with harvest. Like here, I can remove defenses and aug fire and see if I get anything decent. Pretty good. This was my first character, so I didn't bother with harvest at all. You have cast and damage taken, summon flame golem for a little bit more damage, right? And tempest shield. The only reason I did this is because there's nothing else you can use, so I decided to just have another source of rewriting my elemental equilibrium. Just why not? Pretty good. There's a little chance to block, and it's like a mini arc, so it's pretty good. Recommend it. Moving on to your chest piece. For the chest piece, if you want a budget version, just buy the ethereal cards. Give you a 6-link Valregalia eye level 80. Not ideal if you're trying to craft like an explode chest because you need eye level 85 conquerors. But if you want a cheap one to start off, highly recommend you to do that. Here, you're basically just looking for life. Just use Essences of Greed. You know, the high ones that give you like guaranteed 90 life or higher with whatever raise you need. And then as a prefix, craft 10% of maximum as extra maximum energy shield. Ideally on a Valregalia, obviously. You see here, I go from 972 energy shield to 2,100. This is basically gave me like 1,200 energy shield for dirt cheap. If you want to get like something really good, what I would recommend is getting top end, getting an eye level 85 Valregalia from the temple, because from the temple you have a chance of getting like 100 life, and the 10% or like 8% is extra maximum life will probably give you another probably 300 life. Pretty good, something like that. So 200 to 300 life. I would highly recommend it, and then at that point you can exalt it with Crusader and try to get Explode mod with like the 3 extra Aug Fizz and things like that. Or, you know, go ahead and just try your luck with an Awakener's Orb or something like that with an Explode chest. You do you, but this is the budget version. Highly recommend. Here we have Burning Damage, Divine IRE. I recommend getting a level 21 because it does boost the base damage, right? Infused Channeling, it does affect Ignite, which is great. And you get Infusion, you guys can see here, which makes me deal more damage and less damage from Fizz and Lightning. Less damage taken. Unbound Elements, Deadly Elements, and Ignite Proliferation. You could use Swift Affliction, but honestly, I prefer having a longer duration Ignite that does like consistent damage than a very short duration Ignite that does like higher damage. You can play around with it, but blue is easier to hit than green. So this saves me from going for 3 off colors. You do you. Ignite Proliferation is great for essentially just spreading the Ignite. If you had, let's say, like in my video testing when I was showing you the Explode chest, the best ones you want to use is Divine IRE, obviously, Ignite Proliferation, Burning Damage, and Infused Channeling. The last 2 are Unbound and Deadly, right? deadly first, then Unbound. Unbound's the shittiest one. That's pretty much that. Gloves, you want life, good energy shield. These gloves are actually pretty insane because I got good life and good ES. You're looking for basically like good life 70 or higher with at least 100 energy shield for your, you know, Eldritch Battery. And then whatever res you need. And highly recommend crafting for dirt cheap. Chance to avoid being stunned, and it'll cap out your stun resistance with unwavering focus. And the last one over here, lucidity. We'll go over the anointment when we go over the Ami real quick. Right in here, we do have aspect as a spider. All you gotta do is buy Venomous first. I'm about to combine with a Pharaoh one. Venomous first of the night, and it's just a beast you would buy from the market as little beast. You would then go to your menagerie, click it, and then it adds it as a recipe. I don't know if I have it here, so I'm gonna show you. I do not have it. Basically like this. It'll come up here and it'll be like, oh, craft aspect as a spider on an item. And it can be a ring, like any ring that has an open suffix. It's available. My rings didn't. My Ami does have an open suffix. No. So I crafted on my gloves because it doesn't have an it had an open suffix for me to use it on. But any item, doesn't matter if it's jewelry, it can be a belt, that has an open suffix, you can craft it, and that's it. It costs like, I think 15 to 20 chaos to buy the beast. Very, very cheap. Just make sure you have enough chaos res because it will destroy you without chaos res. Right, and here we have the Hex Touch, Flammability, Overstorms, and increased crit. That way,
ready and not before.
My Overstorms will curse the enemy and at the same time has a high chance of proccing Elemental Overload, which is great. I love utility skills, man. I'm like that. I press a lot of buttons. Belt, you ideally want a Stygian Vise, right? But this had good fire, cold, and chaos res. I was like, is that tier 2 chaos res? Yeah. And I wanted the chaos res because I'm here. I'm like negative 19, and then with a series I'm positive 16, which is great. But Eldritch Battery build because the chaos resistance does chaos damage does bypass your Eldritch Battery. So I just kept it. It's budget, but ideally you want a Stygian Vise, and then in the Abyssal Jewel you want like maximum life or damage over time while holding a shield, things like that. Pretty much it. Anything else in that will just be stats or energy shield. Something dirt cheap, you know, nothing too crazy. Right. And then on my boots, you just want life, res, and movement speed. If you want to go all out, get elusive on there. Be very good for defense and extra movement speed. Here we have vitality because we have extra space. I have a level 8, but I do believe I can raise it even higher. And the PoB is the correct number. I don't know what I left it at. Let me check it out right here. And the reason behind this is just get a little extra region. I didn't have another ore to use. Actually, no, a better reason. It's actually level. I left it level 8. Can I go higher? I can go higher. You can put it all the way to level 13. I'll save it there for literally 173 free regen, right? And the reason behind that is because we're using a Watcher's Eye, and since we have no source of life leech, we do have ES leech but not life leech. This helps sustain a lot for like a lot of things, and I highly recommend it. It's decently expensive. Let me go ahead and price check it real quick. You know, put my trade macro real quick. I'd have it on. And it just allows you to basically sustain your life pool during a fight if your life flask were to go away. That should be up already. Put it in. But there you go. And it's like 30C. It's not too expensive. And I'll tell you what you're looking for. I think I bought it for more expensive when I first bought it. It was like an Exalt. I think it dropped since then. But it's just amazing for defense, so I highly recommend it. And it gives you life and energy shield, which is great for your overall build. And that's basically the reason I picked Vitality on top of the life regen. Right, that's a single socket. Don't look at anything because it increased the price. And here we have Flame Dash, Steel Skin, and our handy dandy second wind. That way we can, you know, have a shorter cooldown and cast Flame Dash 4 times. And we have a Steel Skin with lower cooldown for more HP. And otherwise, other than that, let's go into our rings. Rings you ideally want in Opal Ring. I didn't even bless this damn thing. I feel stupid. That's what you know is your first character, right? You want an Opal Ring, ideally for damage. With life, res, and then if you want, uses Essence of Hysteria, I believe is the correct one, and allows you to try to get that gain 10% of physicals extra fire. But if that is too expensive for you, just use Essences of Anger to get something like this ring, where you get fire damage on top of the Opal Ring. Right? Do not use of Circle of Anguish ring. It does not work. It will mess your build up. But you're looking for life, res, and fire damage. Basically, just of that. That's all. Right? And if you need 2 stone rings for res, go ahead and use that. And then our Ami is just going to be, you know, you want dexterity and I think strength. But I bought this one dirt cheap, so I just kept it. But you want dexterity and strength. You don't really need the int. And you want fire damage. And that's pretty much it. Cast speed if you need it. life and res. The only thing you could do if you want to max it out, you can go for like a hunter base and get fire damage over time multiplier, or you could go like, I think hunter as well, where it does like +1 to dexterity or int gems, right? This is a strength and int gem. So if you get +1 to int gems or +1 to strength gems, I believe the strength one is warlord. You know, there's more damage than probably the fire damage on this, but this is dirt cheap. You know, you don't have to go all out. But there's so much potential for more damage if you guys want to go that route with the availability of harvest nowadays, right? So that's all you want. And then the anointment is very, you know, pretty like decently cheap. It does have a silver, and it gives you a chance to avoid being stunned and minus mana cost. You don't really need to care about it since my mana doesn't even move, bro. But yeah, whatever. And it does give 30% extra damage. So it does affect the ignite a little decent chunk. So it's not too bad overall for both defense and offense. Moving on to your flask, Quicksilver, movement speed. If I need a curse on a map, I drop a little bit of movement speed and go for a Quicksilver of warding. That way, you know, I just have immune to curses, so just to be safe, right? I feel myself going into the hardcore realm more and more the more I play this game. Don't ask me why. Diamond Flask of Bubbling. This was recommended to me, and actually it's been absolutely amazing. If you run a low recovery map, your life leech and vitality is going to be really slow. So this comes handy basically when you just want to recover the life instantaneously. It's just so good. I highly recommend it. So get a Bubbling Divine Life of Staunching. It's like the 50% recovered instantaneously and an immunity to bleed, right? A Silver Flask of Freeze, right? And you want 23% reduced charges used or higher. That way you can pop it twice. Otherwise, you can only pop it once, which is annoying. It's only there for you to get 20 charges quicker. Once you pop it, you get the charges quicker, right? Taste of Fate for more damage and fizz reduction. Ezreal's Promise for literally insane crafts of damage. Oh, and it does have Leech. I guess you don't really need the Vitality, but the Vitality basically sustains it just in case your Ezreal's Promise does not, you know, it's not active. If you run out of flask for whatever reason, you're in a boss fight, it's extended, right? Vitality will help you sustain. But I completely overlooked this. I forgot that it gives you Chaos Leech. But I think this one is the better node, right? So just for sustain, I recommend this. It's cheap enough anyway. That's pretty much the gist of that for your bandits. You want to just kill all of them because you don't care about any of them. Crit multi doesn't affect you. And then for your Pantheon, if you have immunity to stuns, you can go for Sword of Akali. I recommend getting everything, especially the Chaos Rays against damage over time. Very, very handy. I never did it though, right? Because I did use them for the longest time until I fixed my stun. But if you don't have all of the stun immunity yet and you find yourself getting stunned a lot, pick up Soul of Ranking until you get your stun immunity stuff. And then here, Silver Satha for the Life Flask. But you could go Social Card for reduced chaos damage taken and things like that. You pick one or the other. Both are absolutely fantastic. And with that, guys, that's pretty much wraps up the entire build guide. I'm again sorry for like delaying this thing. The build has been fantastic. I kind of wish I went more with it as the, you know, instead of a starter, get an explode chest, get like more damage +1. And I feel like it would have been an amazing build for everything. And I still keep it because it's immune to both physical and elemental reflect. So it's just super handy for those builds that I can't do either one. And I'm like, okay, whatever, go back to my Elementalist, will do it for me. And it's absolutely great. So I might come back to this and just min-max it because Harvest is available and I really like the build a lot. And all the items are dirt cheap, so it's not worth selling off anyways. And we'll see what happens. I may do like a brush up video of showing you guys how this build does, but that's in the future talks. We'll see if I have enough time. Other than that, I do want to let you guys know my busy season has started my job. So if there's like slight delays, instead of like every week, it's like a week and a half or two. That's because of that. So my hours are already crazy as it is. Now it's even crazier. But don't worry about me. I'll be fine. Just expect more from me in the future. I do have 2 builds that are already basically on it. One's done and another one's on its way already. So I'll look out for that. Otherwise, guys, thanks so much for watching. As always, the support has been really good lately. And yeah, catch you guys later in the next build guide or informative video. Peace out.